Hi, and welcome once again to Ivy English. I'm Karen.
And I'm Chris Gorski.
Today is October 18th, and today I hope that you are listening with a full stomach.
Yeah, because we have a yummy mystery for you. We're talking about sweet potatoes versus yams, which for a lot of Americans would say, what do you mean? They're the same thing.
Potatoes versus potatoes. What's going on here? Exactly. That's right. And if I just read this as an American growing up in Minnesota and not having been here, I would also be confused because yams were something that we made candied yams at Thanksgiving.
Oh, I want to talk about this later.
I know, the problem is this article really gave me a craving for sweet potatoes. But in America, when you hear somebody call something yams, it is sweet potatoes. And it's very clear to you if you live in Taiwan and you know the Chinese translation of sweet potatoes and of yams, you would never, ever mix them up. But we do in American English, and there's a reason for it.
That's right. And when we say you get them mixed up, they are completely intertwined. As you guys probably know, I always try to dig up some fun facts or some interesting tidbits about it.
Dig up. Was that on purpose?
That's a little bit of a pun there to dig up your sweet potatoes. But when I was trying to find information, I kept coming across American authors, and at no point was I ever confident this person knew the difference between a true yam, like an African yam, versus what we think of as a yam in the United States or a sweet potato. They are just so intertwined as to become completely indistinguishable.
Let's just jump into the story. Our title again is A Yummy Mystery, Sweet Potatoes versus Yams. Now, yummy means delicious. I think everybody knows this word. It's kind of popular here in Taiwan as well. So a yummy mystery, it's a mystery, and it's something that will probably make you hungry, make your mouth water. Sweet potatoes versus, now normally versus is VS period. In British English, they sometimes omit the period. But it's VS period. Do not write V period S. That is wrong. So VS period. Sometimes a period is omitted, especially in British English. Or in legal cases.
This is exactly where we're going next.
Go ahead.
Do it. No, do it, please.
For example, Jones versus Smith, they will often write it with just a V and a period, and it's Jones v. Smith.
This is especially used in legal ideas. So if you personally are interested in law, or you are not talking about law, you need to pay attention to this because it is an important distinction.
But definitely do not write V period S or V period S period. Write small letters. VS period is the way we do it in American English normally. All right. So that was our title, Sweet Potatoes versus Yams. We're comparing the two because they are different. All right. Paragraph 1. Living in Taiwan, we may not have difficulty telling sweet potatoes from yams. Yet, the confusion over these two vegetables is a tricky issue in countries such as the United States. You may wonder why this misunderstanding appeared and what the differences between a sweet potato and a yam are. Let's dip into this article and reveal their true identities.
First, the crux of the matter. Sweet potatoes and yams are not the same. More specifically, they are both flowering plants, but are not in the same family. Sweet potatoes are in the morning glory family, while yams are closely related to grasses and lilies. Second, despite the fact that they both resemble potatoes to some degree and are starchy vegetables, there is a stark difference in appearance between them. Yams are rough on the outside, and their skin is often likened to the bark of a tree. Meanwhile, sweet potatoes have smooth skin with a reddish or coppery hue.
The distinction between sweet potatoes and yams is more than just skin deep. Various species of them show different colors after being peeled. Sweet potatoes usually have yellow, orange, or purple flesh. As for yams, they may be white or yellow or even purple. Anyone who has ever compared the taste of a yam with that of a sweet potato knows that there is little similarity. Yams tend to be somewhat bitter, dry, and bland without seasoning. In comparison, sweet potatoes are much sweeter and moister. If these vegetables are so different from each other, then why is there still confusion? Grab some sweet potato fries because it's a long story. But if you are interested, you're not going to hear it till tomorrow. It is long, so we don't have room for it today. Make sure you tune in tomorrow to find out what that long story is. In the meantime, we're just kind of paving the way for what we're going to talk about tomorrow. We're giving you some background on sweet potatoes and yams. So back to the beginning. Living in Taiwan, we may not have difficulty telling sweet potatoes from yams. In other words, the Chinese words for these two foods is totally different. Nobody would ever mix them up.
And everyone is rather familiar with how they're cooked and how they're prepared. I feel, honestly, we may not have difficulty is a little bit of an understatement.
Yeah, okay, I'll take that. Next sentence, yet the confusion over these two vegetables is a tricky issue in countries such as the United States. And I would say pretty much just the United States. I don't know about Canada, possibly
I don't know
Canada.
about that. Yeah, that is a good question. I was around some Canadians. I wonder if we had this article by that time, because for Canada Day, I was thinking about, I should have talked to them. Either way, to tell you the truth, I did not know the difference between a yam and a sweet potato until I was in Taiwan. It was news to me that they were not, in fact, the same. I used to think yam was like a Native American word.
Right. And actually, one reason is because we don't eat yams much in the U.S.
Yeah.
The yams that you call yams, which are the real yams. So since we don't have the so-called real yams, it doesn't really matter that we call sweet potatoes by another name because we just don't even know what those real yams are.
Sweet potato by any other name would still taste as sweet.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
I'm going to appropriate some Shakespeare here.
You may wonder why this misunderstanding appeared and what the differences between a sweet potato and a yam are. Now, as I'm reading that, because I've lived here so long and I know the differences so well, it made me laugh. I go, do you really have to explain this to somebody? Gosh, they're so different.
It is a little silly being from here. And I imagine, you being a Chinese speaker, dear listener, you may feel that this is a bit of a silly article. Imagine yourself from an American's perspective. These are virtually identical things in your brain. And so this is a little bit of an exercise of foreigners talking amongst themselves.
That's right. But keep it in mind that it is an important difference. Because
it really is.
Because I was discussing this online with somebody I didn't know. And when you're talking with somebody, it sometimes turns into an argument for no good reason. And the other person will often be rude for no good reason. You may get an urge to be rude, but I've learned to just shut up, forget it. It's not worth it. But in that point, I said, well, actually, sweet potatoes and yams are very different. And they were very dismissive. They go, they're the same thing. We call them the same thing. And then they just went on a tirade.
Yeah, people hate being wrong on the internet. It's okay to be wrong, everyone. It's okay.
And besides, if Americans think that way, that's the only thing that matters.
Yeah.
So that's what you will run into. I'm warning you. Don't get into that argument. If they don't want to talk, then just don't talk. It's not worth it. But in fact, we don't know what a real yam is. So the last sentence of our paragraph, let's dip into this article and reveal their true identities. To dip into something, that means to start dealing with it, engaging with it, but you're not necessarily going really deeply. You're just going to try to get into it, read it, and give it a little chance is basically what it means. And when you read the article, you will find out why they are two very different things, what their real identity is.
This should say to dig in. Let's dig in. But because dip is kind of like a sauce. I'm just saying.
That's right.
From an author's perspective, that's where I would have went. Okay, before we start paragraph 2, I need to ask you this question. Next month is Thanksgiving, and that's a time when many Americans will enjoy some sweet potatoes or yams. So I need to ask you, what is your feeling on this dish? You take the sweet potatoes, you candy them, you add a bunch of butter and then cover them with marshmallows. Delicious or completely vile?
And pecans. Don't forget the pecans.
Oh, so I'm guessing you're a fan?
No.
Oh, I hate this dish.
Because
it's so gross.
It's so gross. I have actually sworn off sugar. I don't use added sugar as much as I can avoid it. And even natural foods that contain a lot of sugar, I very seldom eat sweet potatoes, even though I think they're delicious. They are just too sweet.
Yeah.
Very, very sweet.
So Americans have this dish it's a side dish. It's not served as a dessert, but listen to these ingredients. It's sugar, sweet potatoes,
brown sugar. It's
brown
usually
sugar.
Brown sugar.
That's right. Brown sugar.
Yeah.
There are marshmallows on top. It's filled with butter and cinnamon. It's very sweet.
And
it's
pecans.
Like candy.
Yeah.
And pecans. That's right. And I don't know. You guys, tell us in those comments if you're watching on YouTube. Does this sound delicious or not? It's served as like a vegetable dish, not a dessert.
Yes. Fortunately, my mother never, ever put marshmallows on them. As I remember, I don't think she ever went that far. But she did candy them, and I liked it when I was a kid. Candied sweet potatoes or candied yams, because we didn't have it very often. It was a very special dish. And you have the exact same dish in the night markets in Taiwan, is candied sweet potatoes. They're very common in Taiwan.
Oh, no thanks for me.
Too sweet.
Way too much for me. That's
Even
right.
just plain sweet potatoes are too sweet for me. But yeah, so you've learned something else about American culture here.
Let's go to paragraph 2. First, the crux of the matter. Sweet potatoes and yams are not the same.
I have a really good Chinese word for crux. Can I break the rules once?
Yes, you can, because this is a useful word.
症结.
Sure. I mean, it just means cross, right? If you look at the word crux and your Latin is any good at all, you could see this word means cross. And so, yeah, that fits for me.
That means where the problem is. You found the root of the problem, but 症结 is a not common word, but that's the exact translation of crux.
Look at the word crux. If your Latin is any good at all, this just means cross. And crux ends in the letter X. The letter X is made of two V's kind of put together, and those little middle parts of the V's, that's where everything is held together. That's the crux of the letter.
Right. You can also say the root of the matter. That's about the same meaning.
Let's continue. More specifically, they are both flowering plants, but are not in the same family.
When you take it from this approach, I think it's quite convincing. So as similar as you may think they are, they're just two totally different families botanically. Botanically means the study of plants.
Let's continue. Sweet potatoes are in the morning glory family, while yams are closely related to grasses and lilies.
We can tell you the meaning of morning glory without using Chinese directly. Think of leading a cow, like on a rope. If you're leading a cow, it's that. Take those two words and then add the word flower, and that's how you say morning glory in Chinese. And then grasses and lilies is pretty self-explanatory. So grasses, we all know what those are, and actually it's not like rice is a grass. And then lilies, like Easter lilies. So they're just two very different families.
Morning glory is a pretty word.
It is.
There we go. Second, despite the fact that they both resemble or look like potatoes to some degree and are starchy vegetables, there is a stark difference in appearance between them.
Especially with yams, and we won't go into the details. Keep listening. A stark difference means a very, very big difference.
Yeah, a very wide difference. Now, starchy. So starch, we might know from a few different ways you approach this. Starch is kind of one of those complex carbohydrates you have in your food. They're not easy to break down. It comes from a Germanic root, and it means strong. It's related to the word strong, and you can use starch to make your collars on your shirts nice and stiff. And that's what makes it very strong.
Actually, starch is converted pretty quickly into sugar. We learned this in science class in grade school. If you suck on a piece of cracker, which is basically just flour, it will get sweet because it's being converted into sugar.
Let's continue. Yams are rough on the outside, and their skin is often likened to the bark of a tree.
So here is the first main difference. Actually, they're sort of like a long cane. Rather than being an oblong, ball-shaped thing, they're a long cane, and they look quite different. And their skin is very different. It's very rough to the touch.
When I saw bark of a tree, to me, I always thought a yam had the skin kind of like a coconut. That was how I always imagined it.
Not that hard.
Yeah, I agree that I think the bark of a tree is more accurate. Just in my mind, I was like, oh, this is kind of like a coconut, because I needed a way to understand what a real yam was like. And I needed a new perspective because it's not a sweet potato. And when I was teaching myself these differences, it just didn't always line up. And I was like, oh, okay, it's more like a coconut.
Yeah, it's not anywhere near that hard. It's just a bit tough.
Okay, let's continue. Meanwhile, sweet potatoes have smooth skin with a reddish or coppery hue.
That's right. And they're reasonably easy to peel, but not quite as easy as regular potatoes.
Do you keep your sweet potato skins or do you peel them?
I peel them.
Do you peel your potatoes or do you keep the skin?
Oh, actually, I bake them often with the skin, but I still pull the skin off.
I keep the skins on at all times. Number one, I can't be bothered to peel my potatoes or carrots or whatever. If I can eat it, I'm going to eat it.
That's good. Okay, more fiber. And we'll also mention the word coppery. Copper is a metal. It's often used in electrical wiring, and it is red, so it says reddish or coppery hue.
Now, being related to eating the skins of your potatoes and carrots, I was like, well, can you eat the skin of a yam? Now, I mean like a real yam, an African yam. And I could not find a clear answer because all of the sources that I would read kind of conflate. They bring sweet potato and yam under the same umbrella. So I had no way of telling, was the skin of a real yam edible or not? I have no idea. So I guess the best thing I can do is just go ask like a person really familiar with cooking real yams like in Taiwan. But man, I could not find the truth about this.
I think if you did a search in Chinese, you could have gotten the answer more easily.
But the kind of point was I wanted to see the overlap in the English and Chinese. I definitely was focusing on the English on purpose because I wanted to see, was there any way of telling these two things apart? And over and over again, it's identical.
Completely mixed together. That's right. But I can say that it is quite tough, and I don't think that you would enjoy it.
It probably wouldn't even taste good, right?
No, it's just too tough. You would probably spit out the fiber. And also the word hue, that means the depth of a color. So if we're making some fine adjustments to a color, we call that hue. All right, our third paragraph, the distinction between sweet potatoes and yams is more than just skin deep.
Hey, finger pistols here, pow.
We have a little pun here.
Little pun here.
Okay, so skin deep, that means, for example, beauty is not just skin deep. We also care about the beauty of the inside of the person, their heart.
You should care about the personality of this person as well.
That's right. So skin deep, it's not just the skin that's different. Various species of them show different colors after being peeled. So after you peel a sweet potato and after you peel a yam, you're going to find that the flesh inside is of different colors in each case.
And they'll change over time as well.
Yeah, if you leave them sitting out. Sweet potatoes usually have yellow, orange, or purple flesh. I actually am partial to the orange ones because they're sweeter. They're very sweet. The yellow ones are less sweet. The purple ones are very common lately, and they're also very tasty.
And also, tomatoes and carrots used to be a lot like this before they became more uniform, where carrots are almost always orange and tomatoes are almost always red. But there are a lot of really delicious, a wide variety of colors, a small rainbow of choices. If you can get to the right kind of farmer, try them out. They're all really interesting and they're fun to get, honestly.
That's right. Purple carrots were popular for a while. Okay, to go on. As for yams, they may be white or yellow or even purple. So those are some of the colors of yams. It says even purple, but we've already talked about sweet potatoes being purple. So that's one place where they are similar. I want to add something to this. It's not just the color. Yams are slimy.
Yeah, they are slimy. In fact, one of the questions, again, while I was kind of digging up here, is like, can you eat a slimy yam? And it was like, yes. In fact, I think if you chopped the yam open and it didn't get slimy, I would be more suspect. Wouldn't you be more like, what's wrong with the yam that's not slimy?
That's right. And when you cook it, it still has that sliminess. Slimy means slippery. It means it's got a liquid on it that's very slippery to the touch. And sweet potatoes are not like that at all. They are creamier.
That's right. And I read an interesting article, a food blog, talking about yams from an Indian chef. And she was saying that her grandmother taught her that, of course, the sliminess of a yam will irritate your skin or your tongue if it's not cooked properly. And so one of the tricks her grandmother taught her was to take coconut oil and rub it all over your hands. This will help protect your fingers from being irritated, and then to take the little chunks of your yam and to soak it in tamarind juice. And that will actually help kind of get rid of all the slime. And I'm sure that would taste really good too.
I think what they often do here is they blanch them, pieces of yam, in hot water, in boiling water.
That makes sense.
So you blanch them. That means you boil them very briefly in hot water, and that gets rid of some of the slime. All right. So anyone who has ever compared the taste of a yam with that of a sweet potato knows that there is little similarity. And as I read this, I'm thinking about the creamy sweetness of a sweet potato.
How do you normally eat your yams?
I guess I usually bake them too. I bake them with the skin on, but I just take the skin off when I'm eating them.
Now you might know this a little better than I do because, again, as I told you, I didn't have a lot of experience with true yams in the United States. I'd probably say I had no experience. Mm-hmm. And for me, a yam overlaps with taro in Taiwan. And so
they're very different.
Are they also
totally
really
different?
So what I thought, or I probably haven't had a true yam in my life then, because I think that I always call it a taro. Maybe, I don't know.
Okay, well, taros are very brown, and they've sort of got circles around them that are hairy. And when you cut it open, then they are purple. But yams are like a long tube. They're like a long cane, and they're usually beige colored. So you may not have had them because they're eaten in Taiwan, but they're not nearly as common as taros.
So the way I normally eat this is at a hot pot restaurant. And I always order in Chinese.
That's taro.
The taro, okay.
It's taro. So you may have never had yam, or maybe you had it and you didn't know what it was because they put them in. Or I
assumed it was taro. Either way, every time I've had it, delicious. So I'm not complaining.
That's taro. Okay, so yams are usually pretty white, and you'll find chunks of them in vegetarian lunch boxes. They often put them. So you may have had one and not known what it was.
Not knowing it. Well, okay, so that's par for the course. It just keeps going that way because yam, sweet potato, taro, who knows? It's all yummy. I'm fine.
Okay. All right. So for me, when I read this sentence, I think of the sweet creaminess of a sweet potato. Next sentence, yams tend to be somewhat bitter, dry, and bland without seasoning. In comparison, sweet potatoes are much sweeter and moister, and that is really true.
That's why people call me Mr. Yam. Bitter, dry, and bland.
My, aren't we being humble? Okay. All right. So you have to actually know how to cook them properly. Like I said, if you blanch them in boiling water first, and then you season them well when you're cooking them, yams will taste better. But sweet potatoes, you don't have to do anything. Just eat them as they are. And I think that's something Chris likes to do when he's hungry after 11 p.m. and he makes a 7-Eleven run. Is that true?
Yeah, and well, maybe not after 11 p.m. because those sweet potatoes are, oh boy, they're long past their prime.
Oh.
But if I'm ever out and about, as we've discussed previously, I am a vegetarian, and because my hours are a little bit different than most people, I have a later schedule than most. A lot of vegetarian restaurants will be closed, or they're taking a break, or they're not open, and I need food, and I'm kind of hungry. So I will just go to 7-Eleven or Family Mart or whatever store, and I'll just jam on some sweet potatoes. I will get a few, and as long as they're not overcooked where they get really tough,
yeah, they get hard.
I will eat a lot of sweet potatoes. In terms of 7-Eleven, it's one of my most popular purchases or most common purchases. I'll get them 4 or 5 times a week.
They contain a lot of carbohydrates, and that's one reason I don't usually eat them. However, they are not processed. It's one of the few unprocessed foods you can get.
Yeah, I assume that, I don't even know if they're even cleaned properly. I kind of don't care. They taste really good, and I'm not dead yet. So I get them really regularly.
A healthier choice. Okay, our last sentence. If these vegetables are so different from each other, then why is there still confusion? Well, you can see with Chris, he actually is not sure the difference between taro and yam, and so that will help you understand. It is a real thing for Americans, people who grew up in America. Grab some sweet potato fries because it's a long story. I hesitate when I read this because in addition to giving up sugar, I have also pretty much given up fried food. I try to avoid it wherever I can. And sweet potato fries, they are often greasy, and I even avoid vegetable oil. It's not really that good for you, in my opinion. So he's just trying to be kind of cute here and saying, well, just have some sweet potato fries. It's something you can get at a very popular chicken outlet in Taiwan.
Yeah.
And then be patient because we're going to explain to you what the difference is. And it's going to take a while to explain it. So we're just kind of asking you to indulge us. Indulge us, that means be patient with us. But you're going to have to wait because we won't tell you till tomorrow.
That's right. Now, just for the record, before we go, sweet potatoes have been very popular in our diet for a very long time. But yams, by far, are the king here. So we have evidence of yams, real yams, being consumed over 50,000 years ago.
Oh my goodness.
So they have been eaten for a very, very long time by many, many people. And they're a great staple food for people, especially in Africa.
Yes. Okay. That's all good to know. And you'll find out more tomorrow. Tune in then. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.